Melissa and I spoke with campaign strategist Sean Clegg about what's going behind the scenes in what some people are calling the California Democratic Party demolition derby.
We're seeing a real fight about whether there was a fair process for the election of the California Democratic Party chair. As you know, Kimberly Ellis still has not conceded.
But what does it say about the whole party in general?
What it says about, look, we registered 3 million new voters in California last year. 40% of them are millennials. We're seeing an upsurge of millennial activity in the party, and it's making a lot of the party elders uncomfortable.
So is this Bernie-crats versus the old guard?
It's part Bernie-crats. I think it's part newcomers who are upset about the Trump revolution.
Well, and things got really nasty at the convention. People were getting into arguments. People were getting into verbal confrontations. It was not your usual Democratic Party convention. And now that we see, we've got one of the frontrunners who hasn't conceded, bringing in lawyers, releasing memos about voting irregularities, basically accusing the establishment of stealing the election. I mean, that is really unique.
This sounds like something out of Trump land.
It does sound like something out of Trump land, and I think that the party elders would be well advised to open up the process and to preserve those records and to accede to that independent audit.
But what about the bigger question of should they accede to the Bernie-crats? Should they, in the drive to get 50+1%, is it smarter to go left or go to the moderates?
I think left-right is maybe not the direction we're talking about, but if you want to put it in those terms, I think we got to go left to get to the middle, which is to say we got to talk about universal health care. We got to talk about free college, not because they fall on a left-right continuum, but because people in the middle are feeling squeezed right now on cost of living. Well,
I mean, I think the party elders, though, do have a legitimate beef when they say, look, we have been fighting for single-payer care since the 80s. We have been asking for these things as well, and for all these new people to come in as if they've just discovered this issue, as if we haven't been in the trenches, signing petitions, knocking on doors, distributing pamphlets for decades. They feel disrespected by a lot of the new folks to the party.
Is that the natural flow of politics?
I think that's right. And the bottom line is Democrats win when millennials show up. We lose badly when they don't.
And now that we've got single payer, heading into the final stretch of getting voted on in the legislature, depending on what happens there, could really, determine how much enthusiasm there is for the party and for certain candidates going forward.
There are a number of issues like that. There's the environment as well. And it's going to be interesting because, as he pointed out, when the millenniums show up, you do win. But in California, we have that open-ended primary where moderates and millenniums can be fighting each other as well, right?
That's true. And, actually...
But they've got to show up. And the question is, do they show up when it counts?
Well, we've also seen some Republicans really enjoying watching the Democrats fight over this party election, because traditionally Democrats have been against requiring identification for voting.
Oh, and they're asking
Republicans
for it now.
Are saying, oh, you see how things can get a little dicey when we don't properly ID people on election day. So they've had their own fun at the Democrats' expense here. And California Senator Kamala Harris was there for Comey's testimony last week. She was also cut off during her questioning of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Take a listen.
Are you willing or are you not willing to give him the authority to be fully independent of your ability statutorily and legally to fire him?
He has the...
Yes or no, sir?
He has the full independence that is authorized by those regulations. And
are
Senator,
you willing to do as has been done before?
Would the senator suspend? The chair is going to exercise its right to allow the witnesses to answer the question, and the committee is on notice to provide the witnesses the courtesy, which has not been extended all the way across, extend the courtesy for questions to get answered.
Mr. Chairman, respespectly,
Mr. Rosenstein,
I would point out that this witness has joked with as we all have,
the senator
ability
will suspend.
to filibuster.
Mr. Rosenstein, would you like to thoroughly answer the question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I'm not joking.
Harris wanted to know if Special Counsel Robert Mueller would receive full independence from the Justice Department during his investigation into Russian interference in that 2016 election.
Well, much of America was watching that exchange, and Melissa and I spoke with Harris's campaign strategist, Sean Clegg, about the lead-up to her debut in the national spotlight.
She's kicked it into a different gear. I think she would acknowledge that. And one thing she said to the San Francisco Chronicle as she was coming into office was she felt like the handcuffs were off. It's less about Kamala Harris getting a boost and more about Kamala Harris standing up and fighting for what she campaigned on.
Okay, enough of the rhetoric.
Yeah.
What kind of a boost is she getting out of this? I understand you guys are getting a tremendous amount of fundraising as a result.
It's true. She's raised about $1 million for her own committee since getting into office. She's raised $250,000 for her colleagues, which I think is the biggest benefit.
Well, look, her staff is clearly on top of this. The other day, after she was sort of shushed by male members of the committee that she's on, immediately a fundraising email went out that, subject line, they told me to be courteous or something like that. So she's clearly understanding that things are happening, and she's leveraging those as best she can.
She gets that it's about courage, not courtesy.
Okay, but would this we even be hearing from her if it wasn't for a Donald Trump?
If it were a Hillary Clinton administration, it would be a slow climb, an anonymous climb. The election of Trump has had a levelizing effect in the United States Senate. All voices are equal, and she's raising her voice.
So it's sort of upset the seniority system in terms of who gets attention.
Well, it's not just that, but it's also, remember, the Democrats now are really grasping, trying to find new talent to get behind. I mean, when all of your leadership is in their 70s and many of whom have already run for president, they're definitely looking for a young, new person to get behind, and she sort of fits the bill.
I'd just say she's made for this moment. She's honed these prosecutorial skills over a lifetime, and if you've been on the receiving end of a Kamala Harris cross-examination, you know what I mean.
Yes, but as her time in Attorney General in California, she was very much a pick and choose, and I don't recall any big decisions or prosecutorial moments as there is here.
Well, I'll give you an example. During the Senate campaign, in one of the debates, she was asked, and she's the Attorney General, she was asked for her position on recreational marijuana. She refused to commit to whether or not she agreed with the ballot measure that was on the same ballot. That's an example of the kind of sort of lack of decision-making that we saw in California.
But now in the Senate, where you are, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's a different job. Being a senator is about taking positions. Being Attorney General is about winning cases.
Well,
so taking a position is much better for the cameras in some cases.
In some cases, and it's also, but again, it's core to the job. I think the Kamala Harris that we see behind the scenes is really the same Kamala Harris you're seeing out there in front of the cameras today.
To Melissa's point, how much of this is a generational change in the Democratic Party?
I think we are seeing a Tea Party moment in the Democratic Party right now that's driven by an upsurge of millennial interest and outrage at the election of this president.
You know, it's interesting. I remember on election night, Kamala Harris came out and right out front said, this is about sanctuary, this is about upholding our California beliefs. She drew the line right there, and they have been running with that ever since.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind is while she might have come off as indecisive in California, what passes for indecisive here can look, fairly out there in Washington, D.C. So maybe she's both feels more liberated now, but maybe the context is a little different, and so she's standing out certainly a bit more.